Hey, what's up, everyone? So we're here again on another live. All right. I think it was like last week or 2 weeks ago. What we did was went over the 9 reasons or the 9 ways to build muscle without meat. Okay, so this is the vegan blueprint, and what we did in that class, we went over like a couple testimonials, also as well showed you. I'm looking at like everything else, like looking at everything else when it comes down to. Hold on. So we talked about some testimonials, also as well went over like if you had like 3 days to train an exact plan that's like customized to your goals, and a step-by-step guide on teaching you how to eat the right foods to be able to lose fat and also build muscle. Okay, so that's some of the things that went over, and then after that we did go in some Q&A, and I talked a little bit about my past as well, but I like to go ahead and continue from that. So where we left off was where I was speaking about mostly about Gary Roski. Okay, like he was the one that actually helped me to go plant based. Okay, now if you don't know who Gary Roski is, if right now I'm on YouTube Live, so if you don't know who he is, you can do a quick Google search or a YouTube search, type in Gary Yourofsky or the best vegan speech ever, and you'll see who this guy is. He's like a vegan activist. He used to actually tour around the country. Actually, I would even assume traveling around the world, talking about veganism and why you should go vegan. Now, when he got to my school and he did that speech, and I highly recommend it. I don't care if you're a vegan, non-vegan. I think it's something that you should watch. It definitely is going to open up your mind when it comes to consuming mostly a plant-based diet, right? But one of the things that really caught my attention was like the ethical reasons. Like he definitely showed you like what really goes on in animal factories and farms. Then after that, he talked about medical reasons and then also health reasons as well. Okay. Now, when he talked about that, did some people get upset? Did some people continue to eat meat? Of course, right? But I used to eat meat myself. I used to be a big fan of eating meat. And what I ended up doing was, I have a more of an open mind. And one of the things that actually like made me think about going vegan was because I was in the military for about 8 years. So I did about 4 years fully active service in the United States Marine Corps, and also another 4 years in the United States Navy active reserves. Okay. And during that time when I heard that speech, I wasn't vegan. I was 100% carnivore. I was eating meat. And when I heard that speech, the only question I had, because obviously I like animals, and at the same time I didn't like seeing what was going on in the factory farms. Like obviously I knew they get slaughtered. That's a no-brainer. I knew that, but what I didn't know was the treatment of these animals, right? So versus like how most people think now, like let me try to find the most ethical way, like grass fed and let me get organic meat and things like that. Then even going down that route, because I had a common sense. I just knew like at the end of the day, these animals are dying, right? It's just like I just looked at the reality then versus like trying to make some type of like agreement with myself. No, like maybe I could buy my meat more ethically or do happy eggs. I didn't think about none of that shit. You know what I'm saying? I just thought about like, hey, let me try it out. Let me try a plant-based diet. Let me see how it works out, you know? And if there's a way I can actually do this and without the harming of animals, without exploitation, great. If it doesn't work, fine. I'll just eat back meat. And remember, like I wasn't biased when I heard this speech. I had an open mind to it, and for me it was mostly that if I can make that switch, great. If not, whatever. And also at the same time, this was the first time I ever heard anyone talk about animals in this particular way. You know, like I've always seen commercials on TV about like dogs and cats that needs adoption homes and stuff like that, and how those animals get abused. And that was something that he even mentioned in the speech. He talked about speciesism. You know, like how can you care about a pet that you see on TV, but then you chowing down on a freaking chicken breast? You know what I'm saying? You don't care about the chickens when it's a Super Bowl. You're not caring about all those dead animals that you're eating from the Super Bowl, but you see one little aspect commercial, and you want to go ahead, pull out your pocketbook and start donating money. You know what I'm saying? But at the same token, I'm you know, without any commercials, I'm going out to the grocery store to buy like dead animals anyway, to contribute to abuse and suffering. So when he said that, I was like, damn, you know, he makes a pretty good point. You know, he makes a pretty good point. I wasn't trying to fight it. I wasn't trying to like make a huge argument over it. I was like, look, the guy's making a point. Like, it can't hurt to try it out, right? It just can't hurt. Like, even anyway, something that my mom was always telling me, and I think a lot of y'all probably heard the same, especially if you're born in the 80s and maybe even the early 90s, which is like, you know, we should be eating more vegetables anyway. Like, that's something that I always grew up with anyway. It's like, you should be eating more vegetables. Eat your vegetables, eat your fruits. It's good for you, right? Now, the only difference is that I'm taking it to the next step, right? Like, then just incorporating more fruits and vegetables into my diet. I'm doing it like full time. So once I got home, what ended up happening was I threw away like, well, I didn't throw it away. I ate all the meat that I had left in my fridge, right? I remember calling out my parents or my mom and telling her like, yo, I think I'm going to try this vegan stuff, right? Now, once I began, I literally thought that would, like, I was gonna go vegan full force. But then once I started like trying out the diet with like, and remember, like back, I did this like back in 2011, 2012, right? Excuse me. So back then there was no like, you know, Gardein and fake meats and all this stuff. Like all those fake meats, all those mock meats, there was none of that back then. The only thing there was that was a mock meat was like maybe tofurkey deli slices. It's like a plant-based deli meat. And that thing, that small little packet, they still sell it today, which is cost like $3 now. Back then it was like $7, $8. And it wasn't even rational to buy it, especially at that time when I was in college, because for $8 I mean, I was looking at it from, even from that day, I was looking at it from how much protein am I getting from this? 39 grams for $8 for one packet versus like a bag of chicken for at Walmart. I could buy for bag of chicken breasts at Walmart. It's probably cost the same price. I could get it for like $6, $12. You know what I'm saying? A bag of chicken breasts. So I'm like, why am I gonna why I'm gonna spend that much money on that if I can buy chicken breasts way cheaper? So I didn't even do that. I just did the basics, like all whole. It was 100% Whole Foods plant based. I remember buying like maybe some vegan cheese here and there, and it was trash. Like I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Like when I first tried it, and remember this is like 2011, 2012. The cheese was trash, man. It tastes like straight up cardboard, man. Like the options that we have now is nowhere close to where it was like a decade ago. You know what I mean? So when I tried that stuff, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick with the basics, like just Whole Foods plant-based. I did that. I started losing some weight. Okay, that's the honest truth. I started losing a lot of weight. I started losing a lot of fat. I would even say I even lost some muscle, because knowing what I know now, I wasn't getting a lot of protein. I just did what most new vegans do. You take out you focus, hyper focus so much you're eliminating meat that you're not focusing on where you're going to get the amount of protein. So I'm just eating rice, beans, vegetables, fruits. And I started getting ripped though. And even though like I was losing muscle and I was getting ripped, my strength was still up. I still had good strength. It was just like I wasn't like I wasn't jacked like I was when I was on meat. And then eventually I started incorporating like fish. That's when I was like, you know what? Let me start incorporating some like salmon, some tilapia, like some seafood into my diet to get some protein. So I started to do that because remember, back then, like even the internet, Google, social media, none of that was at that level where it's at now. Like I couldn't just go online, find a vegan influencer, follow him, and figure out like, oh, tofu is where you can get protein from. Seitan. Oh, there's another way to get protein. I didn't know none of this stuff. I had to do a lot of self-educating, a lot of research, a lot of Googling. It was tough because I didn't even know any vegans. The only person I knew that was close to a vegan was a vegetarian, and she really didn't help me out that much either. You know what I'm saying? So what I did was I just did that. And then I started changing my major because a lot of things changed during that time frame. Like when I started looking deeper into nutrition, I was already doing personal training as a side job. It was just a side hustle, college job, just to get a few bucks to pay some bills and literally to have some fun. You know what I mean? And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should look deeper into this nutrition stuff, like go deeper into the fitness and really find out the truth about this. You know what I mean? And what I did was I started to do that. I started taking a lot of my electives, moving it in more into health, fitness, nutrition. I even changed schools and started going to ISSA, started going there, started getting my like degree and my certifications for nutrition and exercise and stuff like that. And then and I'm trying to give you like a long story short, right? And so I'm trying to like really summarize everything. So once I started doing that, then I started finding out like other vegan protein options. Like that's when I started realizing about tofu. That's when I started realizing about seitan. And then I started incorporating that into my diet. And especially when I started doing bodybuilding, right? When I started doing that and learning how to count macros and using it in a sports setting, that's when I started really putting on muscle because then I started to understand the importance of counting calories, counting macros, where to get your nutrients from to be able to build muscle optimally, but at the same time, do it on a plant-based diet. Because even the coach that I hired, and he's still my coach till this day, his name's Dave Bogan, right? He was my first bodybuilding coach and my only bodybuilding coach that I ever worked with. And even back then, he was excited to work with me. He didn't tell me anything about like, you need to eat meat to build muscle. He was impressed of how much muscle I already had, like when I just started, So he was like, bro, you have a good frame. You have a good starting point. I think if we dial in this nutrition and with your expertise of knowing where you can get your protein from, I don't think there's going to be any significant difference when it comes to building muscle. He's like, the only thing we could do is try. So even my coach was open-minded because not like some coaches today where they're going to excuse and still use excuses like, oh, you can never build muscle as a vegan. Like, if you know how to count macros and you know about nutrients, like as long as you're doing it right and you know where to get those nutrients from and the proper calories and macros, you can build muscle no matter where the source is coming from. And that's the logic that my coach and I did. So with my expertise of nutrition and also plant-based foods, and then his knowledge over like bodybuilding experience, because he had years of bodybuilding experience already. He had over a decade of experience in bodybuilding. So knowing that and knowing how to use macros to actually optimize muscle, I took a lot of his knowledge and started incorporating into my program and my own diet and started seeing results. Okay. And then from there, I started teaching others, started boosting up my business, and started really focusing on a lot of new vegans because it took me literally about a year or maybe a year and a half to really understand like where I can get a lot of my nutrients from. And then as time went on and more products started to come out, that's when that gave it a better push in the plant-based movement because now we have more diversity of foods and we can make more diversity of dishes with some of those mock meats, regardless of, you know, if it's minimally processed or highly processed. Like I learned how to actually incorporate all of that stuff so they can be a healthy vegan. And obviously I'm looking more towards minimally processed foods with minimal ingredients versus like highly processed foods with tons of ingredients, you know. But would I say that it's bad to have it from time to time? No. And it's the same thing if someone consumes meat who eats a regular cake, eats ice creams, eat cookies, eat processed shit, right? It's the same thing with that as well. Like even if you consume meat, there's a way to have balance if you're incorporating junk food and highly processed stuff. But you want to make sure you're doing more things that's more holistic versus like that's versus processed. But when I started doing the whole vegan thing, that's when I realized that this diet is definitely more optimal for me. And I think it's great because I don't have to indulge into the suffering to a lot of those animals, especially farm animals, where if you think about it, over 9 billion animals die per year from that, like from animal agriculture. So with that, I was like, you know, if I could step back and do it and do something that's like, you know, not so harmful and actually a lot healthier for my health and wellness, why not? And that's when I started training others. And one of the books that I read too, when it came down to everything, was this one right. I don't know if I have it here in my bookshelf. I think I do. No, I don't. So one of the books, one of the first books that I read, and it's in my living room, but I'm not going to get it. But one of the books that I read was Vegan Bodybuilding and Fitness by Robert Sheik. You know what I'm saying? And that book kind of even gave me a path into the bodybuilding scene because that's when I learned that, oh, you know, like this guy stepped on the bodybuilding stage as a vegan, like, wow. And then and then from him, I started seeing other athletes like Tori Washington. I started seeing him and I was like, wow, he competes too. Oh, that's awesome. So I started seeing like a few vegans here and there. It wasn't that many back then. But once I started doing my journey, I'm like, you know, I want to make a statement and show people that's possible because especially back then, man, people felt like you can never do this. First of all, natural. And then second of all, build muscle and be on a bodybuilding stage, you know? So that's why I do what I do now, okay? Now, with that story, that's when, you know, there's certain things that I did realize overall. So one of them, and before I go into it, let me see some of these comments. Battle guys. All right, so I'm going to answer some of the responses. I know some of this is bullshit, but then some of it is like things I could actually respond to. So, Quartz Mankind said like veganism is classism very frequently. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's classism because when I went vegan, I was in college, and in college people are very broke, you know. So that by saying that, that's your own belief system of what you feel because of the class you put yourself in. So that's the only thing I can say about that. So if you limit yourself to a particular class of society, that's because of you, you know. So it has nothing to do with veganism. Like if you feel like veganism is for people with higher money, well, that's your problem. Like I can only say two things. Number one, maybe get your money up. You know what I'm saying? That's number one. Because there's a lot of people who's saying the other way around who consumes meat. Like I literally just put out a post talking about where this guy was talking about you know, the king, to be a king, you have to eat meat. You know what I'm saying? So and last time I checked on grass-fed meat, it's not cheap. You know what I'm saying? It's very expensive. More expensive than plant-based proteins. You know what I'm saying? It's more expensive than a block of tofu. You know what I mean? So that's the only thing I can say about that. Because if you want to be able to do veganism on a budget, then whole foods plant-based is a way to go. And you also have conventional products as well. So if you truly care about like veganism and you truly care about going plant-based and finances are the thing that's holding you back, then do conventional stuff. You know what I'm saying? I know people might say, oh, but the pesticides and stuff like that. Listen, like even when I went vegan, like I started from the bottom of the vegan totem pole, if you could say so. So I started off with all conventional food. You know, I wasn't worried about all the pesticides and shit, because if you think about all the conventional meat, that's worse than the conventional plant-based foods. Okay, so because guess who's eating all the non-GMO corn, non-GMO soy, non-GMO, it's not non-GMO, GMO soy, corn, and wheat, the animals, you know what I'm saying? So they're eating all the pesticides and stuff like that. And if you're buying conventional meat to try to keep budgets tight, guess what you're consuming? You're consuming that plus all the other crap they put into that animal body as well. So I always say you are what you eat. You are what you eat as what it eats as well. Okay, so it goes down a freaking chain. So I always say that. So again, if you want to go more plant-based, then maybe you want to like go more conventional, go more whole foods plant-based, shop at farmers markets. You know, try really budget your money to get the foods you need to incorporate and boost up your health. And then as you get your money up, which I did, once I started getting my money up, I got my degree, got out of school, started working hard to make more money, you know, not just being satisfied to the level of money I was making. I always try to achieve more. You know, the more I started creating more wealth into my life, I started reinvesting in that into higher foods. So like, I remember when I started hearing about like all the crap about conventional foods and conventional seasonings and stuff like that. I couldn't break my bank, but the more money I started putting in, I started reinvesting it. You know, it was slow and steady thing. It didn't happen overnight. You know, it didn't happen over a year or two. It happened over years of being vegan. So like once I started making more money, I started replacing certain foods. Like, all right, now I can stop eating from cans, you know, and bags of rice and beans. Like that's how I was eating. I was eating from like my vegetables was coming from canned foods. And this is before they started even coming out BPA free cans. I was eating it from the straight BPA, that can filled with cancer, man. I was doing shit like that. And then once I started making more money, all right, I could move up from cans to frozen to raw, from raw to organic. You know, like that's how I started doing it. I was eating from Walmart to Publix to Trader Joe's to Whole Foods. Like I didn't just wake up one day as a vegan and say, you know what, I'm gonna go to Whole Foods and buy every organic product they got. You know, now I have a luxury to do that, but before it wasn't like that. You know what I'm saying? So when people say it's classism and it's only for rich and stuff, this is just bullshit, man. You know, I want to be very honest with you. So don't use that as an excuse. You know, if it's a financial thing, then you have a financial problem. It has nothing to do with the diet. Let me also move on down to the next thing. All right, and I think that's it. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and end it here, and then I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.